Hey and welcome. It's Michigan's AutoTalk Podcast. This is episode number 98, and I'm producer Phil Tower. Glad to be with you on this iHeartRadio podcast. We're also wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts, including Apple Podcasts, Spotify. And if your favorite rock could play audio, we'd probably be playable there as well. Every episode of Michigan's AutoTalk is about celebrating everything related to the wonderful, glorious automobile, everything automotive. We're also about helping and supporting you and occasionally entertaining you, car and truck owners across Michigan and beyond. I'm very pleased in this segment to welcome back one of my favorite all-time guests. He's the editor of Car and Driver magazine. We're here with Tony Quiroga to talk about the amazing lightning lap. This is a story that hit the magazine last month. Tony and I have been playing guest tag, I guess, if you will, back and forth. I'm so glad to have you here, Tony. First of all, welcome back. It's good to see you and hear you.
Yeah, thanks for the invite, Phil. I really appreciate it.
So this is really a really cool story. This is something that Car and Driver magazine has been doing for a long time, 16 plus years, at Virginia International Raceway, judging cars by nothing more than what they can do. These are really fast cars. They're all different classes of cars. But it's an interesting story because not only of the location, Virginia International Raceway, I'm curious why that was chosen, but 4 different classes of cars. Is that the right way to explain it, Tony?
Yeah, we have, there are 5 different classes, and occasionally we create classes of cars. For example, we had a police car package class one year just as a fun. Yeah, that was LL Oink. And we chose VIR. We started looking at racetracks in the U.S., the Nürburgring. When we first started doing this, the planning started in like 2005, 2006. The Nürburgring times were becoming a thing. Automakers, magazines were testing cars at the Nürburgring. And we sort of looked at North America and what a big track, because the Nürburgring the Nordschleife is like 12.9 miles, I believe. And we were looking at a track that is that daunting. And I mean, if you drive a car all out for 12.9 miles, it stresses the car in a way that nothing really else can stress it. You're stressing the brakes, you're stressing the cooling system, the engine, everything gets stressed, including the driver. So we looked for the U.S. equivalent of that. And what we came across was Virginia International Raceway. And we do a 4.1 mile configuration, which combines 2 tracks there. So usually racing is done on a smaller track, a smaller version of it. We add a little bit more to the track in our configuration. And the first year, nothing broke 3 minutes. Even a Ford GT of that vintage of a 2006 Ford GT didn't break 3 minutes. Now cars regularly break 3 minutes. And we thought that was going to take a while, and it really didn't. Yeah. So this year we had the first front wheel drive car to break 3 minutes was the Honda Civic Type R. Yeah. We had a few other surprises like that, which was great.
That is a beautiful car, by the way. I know we've talked about that car before. Who drives these cars? Are these drivers you contract, or do they work for Car and Driver? How does that all work?
Well, the original thinking was we wanted us to be in the cars so we can tell the story. And, selfishly, we get to lap an amazing track in the year's hottest cars. And over the years, we've learned more and more and more about, our driving skills have improved. But when you're brought into Lightning Lap, you start out, in the slow stuff. You'll drive 1 or 2 cars, and each editor checks the work of other editors. Sometimes I'll be like Casey Colwell, our executive editor. He drives some of the fastest stuff, and sometimes I'll come up to him and be like, "I'm not sure I'm getting everything out of this. Why don't you go try it?" And we all end up within about a half second of each other.
I love it.
But it's sort of challenging to drive other people's cars because, your plate is usually full with, 3 to 5 cars that you have to learn. They're often very different. The braking zones are all different. They all respond differently. But we think that doing it ourselves, while we probably leave a little bit of time on the table, and we've compared our times to professional drivers and to development drivers who work for the car companies. And we're usually, between 1 or 2 seconds off the pace, which sounds like kind of a lot, but it is a 4.1 mile track that, lap times are anywhere between, 2:35 and, 3:15. So it's not a huge percentage that we're off, but then we get to tell the story ourselves. And we get to tell about the experience, which is which is what we were hoping for when we created the event.
Tony Quiroga is with us. He is the editor-in-chief for Car and Driver magazine, carandriver.com, and this is all about the Lightning Lap 2023, the hottest cars on America's toughest track, 4.1 miles. There are 5 sectors. Tony, can you talk about that a little bit, how those all differ?
Yeah, sure. So Sector 1 has the front straight, basically, the end of the front straight. And then you go into a very, very hard 100, almost a 180-degree corner, a hairpin.
Yeah. I'm looking at it. It's called...
Yeah, you've got to slow. Some of the cars are going like 170, and you've got to slow the car down to around 55 miles an hour. So you go from 170 to 55 in the braking zone. Huge test of the brakes, huge test of the car's stability under that kind of braking. And then you throw it into the first corner. There's a couple of higher speed corners, NASCARs in there. And then as you get into Sector 2, you start running down there's a small S, and then you lead up to a short straight, which it goes into the climbing S's, which are probably the scariest part of the track, at least for me.
Interesting.
You know, I think on a public road, it would probably have a recommended speed of maybe 40, 45 miles an hour. And we're going into it. Some cars are going into it at like 150. And you slow down as you go up the hill, naturally. But some cars are flat through there. Like some cars, you know, typically we average, you know, between 115 and 120 miles an hour in fast cars through the uphill S's. Then you rise to the top of the hill. Then there's this really terrifying downhill blind off camber corner, which sort of throws you off the track. I've actually gone off the track there a couple times over the years, just finding the limit. And then you go into the tightest corner in the track, which is called Oak Tree. It's like a 30, 40 mile an hour corner. And then that spits you out into the back straight. The back straight climbs, and then you go into where we break off from where the racing course is. We go into a course called Patriot Course, which is a very technical course. Lots of hills, lots of blind corners. Super fun. And then you can reconnect with the track, with the original track, with the regular track.
Yeah. Okay.
And that feeds you down a hill and then back onto the front straight. Yeah. And it's a lot of corners. It's a lot of concentration. In manual transmission cars, it's often a lot of shifting. It's a lot of work, and it is, and it requires a ton of concentration. I've been doing it. I think this is my 13th year. I think I missed a year at the beginning, and I missed a year during COVID lockdowns. I didn't travel. I didn't fly out before during that year. So I missed a couple of years, but I've probably lapped the track over 2,000 times. And so it's about 8,000 miles of driving on this racetrack, which is pretty insane.
There's a turn here called the Bitch. And it's, I mean, that's just
not our name for it, I want to say.
But it's a good name for it. That's a good name for it. And we'll have this article link posted on our podcast page for Michigan's Auto Talk. We're talking with Tony Quiroga. He's editor-in-chief for Car and Driver magazine, as we talk about, I mean, what would be a fantasy for most people to go 4.1 miles on the Lightning Lap. This is
we think of it as a employee retention.
But that's a good way of putting it. But it's interesting, and you've got a great visual. I want to give you props for the article, because it'd be one thing to write about this, but it's a great visual. It's an overhead view of the track, but then you've got the elevation, which you were describing really well in the climbing S's part of the track, which looks like a fairly, that's Sector 2. It looks like a fairly straightaway point, but you're right. It's got some S's in it. They, on a map, they don't look like they're a big deal, but like you said, on a regular road, it'd be maybe 40 miles an hour, especially if you're going uphill. Yeah. You've got some blind spots, technically. Fortunately, there's not traffic coming at you, but I really love this. So as we break this down, how many total cars did the Lightning Lap?
This year, what did we have this year? I think we had around 16 or 17.
Yeah.
Typically we have between 15 and 20. It all depends on car availability.
Right.
I mean, we start asking for them, pretty early. But not, sometimes the timing just doesn't line up. Sometimes, we're like a month before some really hot car launches. But we were lucky this year to get, the Corvette Z06, which I think is probably the most significant performance car of the year. So it's the 670 horsepower Corvette. It's really developed for the racetrack. It's got a brand new engine. And Casey Colwell drove that car, and it was phenomenal. I mean, it's by far the least expensive car to get that sub 240 lap. Usually the stuff that it laps below 2 minutes and 40 seconds is, really exotic stuff. McLaren Senna's, Porsche GT2 RS, really expensive stuff. And you can get equipped with the options that we had to replicate the lap. You can get a Z06 for around $130,000. That is if a dealer would sell one to you for $130,000.
Yeah, well said. And just a shout out to the people involved with the story, not only you as senior editor-in-chief David Beard, senior testing editor, you mentioned Casey Colwell, executive director, right, and Dan Edmonds, technical director. I love the last part, and the Z06 did win, lap time of 2:38.6. This is just amazing. The most powerful Corvette ever made, and it's a heavy car as well, too. It's important to point that out. Weighs 3,500 plus pounds, 3,646 pounds, but it is just a beast. What I love is
just built. It's just built. Yeah. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you, Phil.
No, yeah, it is built. What I love, Tony, is the outliers part of the article. You tested some non-performance vehicles. The Kia Carnival, I had totally forgotten about that vehicle. It's an SUV, right? Or is that what it is?
It's a minivan.
It's a minivan.
And,
okay.
So we tested it. We had a long-term one. We were always curious about how quick are regular things. And readers often write in and ask us how quick is their Camry V6? So we lapped a Camry V6. We asked Ford for an F-150 one year just to see what a Ford F-150, the best-selling car in America, what that laps what that laps VIR, but they didn't send us one. So we decided to do the minivan, and then we did the minivan fully loaded too. So with all the seats filled on the minivan, and it was significantly slower, as you would not be too surprised by that.
Yeah, the slowest lightning lap vehicle was the Subaru WRX. Was anybody surprised by either the overperformance or underperformance of any of these vehicles, Tony?
Certainly. Yeah. I drove the Honda Civic Type R, which I mentioned, which was, it took back the record from itself for the fastest front driver. The Z06 also was kind of a surprise. So I drove the last generation C7 Corvette ZR1, which actually was more powerful than the Z06, 755 horsepower. And the entire time I was watching Casey's lap times come down, and I was like, oh, man, he's going to beat me. He's going to beat me. And he ended up beating me by 0.9 seconds in the mid-engine car with a little bit less power.
Nice. Very nice.
So we're definitely pretty competitive with each other, too.
What I love about just the whole attitude of your writers and Car and Driver is you also had Jack Fitzgerald run the track. I don't know who Jack is, but I'd love to hear the story. Jack actually ran the track. There's a picture of him jogging the track. He took 25 minutes, 44 seconds to do the 4.1 mile lap, which I love. It's not a lightning lap, but that's not bad.
For humans, it's pretty good. I mean, it's a 4-mile track, so they were just over 6-minute miles. So Jack is one of our news editors. He writes a lot of news content online, and in college, he was on the track team. So he competed in track. And so, he's a couple of years out of college, so he's not quite in the same shape that he was in college, but he promises to train a little more next year. And he thinks he can get well below 24 minutes. Well,
and he says, I love it. And there's a separate story that Jack has about doing the lightning lap. While I didn't have to contend with overheating fluids or tire temps, I did have a mild hangover. At least he's fully transparent.
He really felt the elevation changes that you mentioned, which in a car, you don't really feel them, obviously. No. But when you're actually out there on the track, standing there and running, which I wouldn't do for very long, but running it, the elevation changes were kind of a butt kicker for him.
You've got, and again, we'll have this link at Michigan's AutoTalk Podcast webpage. You've got some beautiful photography here as well. I want to talk real quickly before we wrap up with Tony Quiroga. He is the editor-in-chief for Car and Driver magazine, caranddriver.com, with us on Michigan's Auto Talk. I want to talk about tires, because tires are a huge part of performance driving. These performance cars are tested with the tires they come with, or do you do tire changes? How does that all work?
They are tested with tires that are supplied by the manufacturer that come on the car as you can buy it. Now, some of the tires are what they call dealer accessories, so they're available through the dealer. And we include all of that in the base price. Whatever it costs, we call it the lightning lap base price, is the price that you need to recreate this lap time. So there are some cars like the Audi RS3, you can get a regular Pirelli P0, or you can get a more exotic tire, a more exotic track tire, Trofeo R. And the difference was like over 10 seconds a lap.
Wow.
Tires are really, really an incredibly important part of performance. They help you in every single way, braking, acceleration, and cornering. And you see that in the lap times.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And that's why I wanted to ask you about that. It's one of the first things I learned from my dad years ago, is just the importance of tires on performance. And so many people think, they look at the car and they go, oh, no, this has got everything I need, but it can make a huge difference, the right tire. And that's why some people actually care a lot about them. And you can always tell a driver's driver, Tony, don't you think, when you look at a certain car that has, a great tire on it versus, maybe the stock tire
versus some really inexpensive tire. Yeah, no, absolutely. They know what they're doing.
Yeah, that's a driver who loves to drive, and it's a driver who appreciates the performance and the suspension, the cornering, everything, because with a good set of tires, a lot of regular consumer cars can be a lot of fun to drive. They really can.
Absolutely.
Any final thoughts about the Lightning Lap this year? Just things you learned compared to last year's? Any feedback from the riders?
Well, I had been driving a lot of really fast stuff, and this year I sort of dialed it back, but I ended up in 3 manual transmission cars, and manual transmission cars are a ton of fun, but man, they're a lot of work too. I mean, I think there was one lap where I had, between 30 and 40 shifts a lap. So and that's each opportunity, each shift is an opportunity to mess up a lap. You miss a shift and you got to just start over. So that was a lot of fun, and that was a lot of work. I wanted to direct your listeners to our YouTube channel too, carandriver.com on YouTube. You can see all the lap times, and then you can see individual editors discussing the challenges and the cars that they drove and the ins and outs, and a little bit of behind the scenes action there too on our YouTube channel.
Yep. That's a great point. I'm looking at one of those YouTube videos, and be sure to check out Car and Driver's YouTube channel. All kinds of great content there. I'm just warning our listeners, you can get lost. You can get lost down the performance rabbit hole. Just saying, those kinds of things
get
do
lost
happen.
There.
Yes, please do get lost there. It's always makes Tony smile, and that will be for his 20th year, Car and Driver next year, getting him that much closer to the bronzed performance tire that you can put on your desk in your office. Tony, always a lot of fun to talk with you. I'm glad we could finally connect, and I look forward to the next fun write-up you have in Car and Driver. Let's connect on that soon, okay?
Great. Thanks for your time, Phil.
Tony Quiroga, Editor-in-Chief, Michigan's AutoTalk Podcast, Car and Driver Magazine. He has been our guest here on Michigan's AutoTalk. You can learn more at caranddriver.com. Don't forget to hit their YouTube channel as well for Car and Driver. Until next time, for host Al Schwinkendorf and John Puick. Yeah, they told me to say that. I'm producer Phil Tower. Have a good one.